Hello, guys. This is Aloysius Zanderman here, or Alex Julian, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about a problem that I call the reviewing and the criticism when it comes to video games, TV, and entertainment in general. Now, you're probably wondering if reviewing can ever seem like it is criticism, or if criticism can seem more like reviewing without actually really being reviewing. So, what does it mean to review something, for example? What does it mean to be a reviewer? To be a reviewer, what it means is you play through the game and you view the game again without playing it and examine it to see if the game is worth your time and if the game is worth the time of others. But more specifically, it really is about you more than like the audience, because let's face it, reviewers and critics can never really exactly review and criticize games for the audience. Like when I talk about Streets of Rage 4, for example, which is the game I'm reviewing in this video, the video game called Streets of Rage 4 for the Nintendo Switch, I often only could really speak about myself. I could only really, at times, really only speak about myself. I cannot, really speak about, what it means for other people to play a game. Because there is that excessive collectivism that people in the video game industry like to get into at times, in which with this high point of magnetism towards other gamers, reviewers and critics often get lost and they start thinking more about others rather than themselves. So reviewers and critics will start thinking more about other people rather than about themselves. And that can be a mistake, because when I hold a controller and when I play a game, when I play Streets of Rage 4 for the Nintendo Switch, I really can only speak about it for myself most of the time. At times, maybe I could sort of give a gesture to the audience about what it means for the audience to play the video game. And let me definitely show you something that is very interesting in this review. Click here. This is my kitchen table. And on the end of this kitchen table, there is the Nintendo Switch near a small TV and a controller. And as you can see, it's at the end of this kitchen table with food there in the cupboard and everything. And I could basically play in the kitchen and enjoy a good time. And of course, this video will be a little bit on the plain side, because this is more about an intellectual activity, as in the mind conundrum, like what it means for a review and a criticism to fit in our heads. Now, critics are at times really different from reviewers. Reviewers just view something again to see if it's worth your time. A critic not only views something again, but with a critical role in reviewing, a critic finds disinterest and neutral but meaningful and dramatic judgment about the object, the art. And not everybody is really used to this criticism of the neutral judgment or the disinterest of a critic's role, if you will. Because often people like to think of video games and they like to, for example, point to Streets of Rage 4 and they like to say, oh, look at the colors. Look at the shapes. Look at the television. I was shopping at Walmart. I was enjoying myself while out with my friends. I was eating at McDonald's and joking about the latest Shamrock milkshake. And people often like to have that kind of joke, as in, like, maybe you see my can here of, brisk iced tea, and you're probably imagining me to be on a diet to a certain extent, and for that reason, I give you partial credit on that point of interest. But hey, with fashion, there's infinite amounts of things that we could always be interested in. We could be interested in ribbons. We could be interested in bows. We could be interested in horses. We could be interested in zebras. We could be interested in the planet Saturn. We could be interested in a black hole. But let me ask you this. If you ever reach a black hole and discover what a black hole really is, I mean, speaking of the future of astronomics and, astronaut work and space ranger stuff, if a space ranger ever really finds out what a black hole is for, will it matter, or will it just be an example of a silly fad of the current fashion of retro modern futurism stuff? Because black holes are actually an old concept. It's not a new idea, in case you do not know. If we could get so excited and so pedantic and unworthy and overstudious for something like a black hole, I think we should take it into consideration that even with Streets of Rage 4 and with the Nintendo Switch, we might be mistaken on some level, one degree or another. Because when it comes to a degree, it can almost seem like when you draw out a degree, such as like when artists draw out characters on their computer technological equipment, for PS5 and Xbox Series X and Xbox Series S and Nintendo Switch OLED, the list goes on. When it comes to artists, programmers, video game studios drawing out their characters, it's not enough just to draw out a character. At this point, when it comes to how long video games have been in the video game industry, I can tell you right now, if you are always emotionless when you play a fighting game, you need some psychiatric help. You need some psychiatric help. You need some hospital work done on you. And you will probably need to be in a mental asylum for years and years, because that's not normal for a gamer. Definitely there's that kind of pseudo gamer who is basically someone who tampers with all these video games without really understanding like what the purpose of a video game is. And I'm sure you know that with Streets of Rage 4, while it may get psychological, there is that importance of electric virtue that I have mentioned in my previous essay on Streets of Rage 4. Electric virtue is something you can find on this smartphone that I'm recording a video on. You might watch my video right now and you're thinking, well, it's not as good as a television, but it gives me intellectual and dramatic viewpoints to the precision of our logistics, if you will. And definitely there are the means to our judgment that we should be aware of, so that way we do not just get carried away by the colors. Because after all, Streets of Rage 4 is also about the gameplay. And the gameplay definitely for a future sequel, if there's ever a future sequel, like, Streets of Rage 5 or Streets of Rage 6 or whatever, there definitely needs to be improvement somewhere on the moves. Because at times the moves do get into the realm of Sega Genesis mechanics, which was based on a 16-bit system by Sega that was fuzzy and rather static, although powerful on the hydro speed of it. Because you could have something like a Sega Genesis system which would maybe be accelerating on the colors, but at the same time the colors would fade, or there would be sounds diminishing into the lower returns. And hey, I'm speaking this way just to really review and do a criticism for you. This literary criticism that I have for you. I do not just write fancy stuff on paper and pretend that it's how I speak. No. Often, big, tall words also go in my mouth, because that's how I do my poetry and that's how I do my reviewing and criticism. especially when I review and criticize works of art that I will never compete against, and that I will just be a neutral bystander with professional or at least hobbyist like reviewing and criticism. And Streets of Rage 4 definitely does have a lot of beautiful marks. Although, I think for every beautiful mark, there might be a couple ugly tangents here and there. Like maybe there would be a slime ball right here, or a fire gulf right here, or something. It's never quite easy to tell because one of the greatest evils that you see in all the characters in Streets of Rage 4 is man's excessive desire to change his own body into some weird thing. Man will often try to, or woman will often try to change his or her appearance into something really intimidating or awkward just to pretend to be a threat. And you have to be careful of that kind of evil because although it is an evil, it is also pretentious. Not all evils are actually effective. Some evils are actually defective and they lose very quickly. Not all evils are very powerful, and in this Streets of Rage 4 game, you will see that so many evils can seem so strong because really they are so weak. And that's why we need to remember that with our life, we have to often restore the retro favors that we have for video games instead of trying to replace it with some kind of neo-modern pretentiousness that makes no sense on the radar except for a political viewpoint. And you take care and God bless.